What if I told you that the biggest battles you fight every single day are not out there in the world, but inside of you? Hidden enemies that whisper in your mind, tear down your confidence, and keep you from feeling free. Most people never notice them, but you do feel their effects. When you doubt yourself, when you hold back your voice, when you feel like something inside you has been locked away for years. Carl Jung believed that within each of us lives what he called the inner child. It's the part of us that once felt wonder, joy, and creativity without fear. But it's also the part that carries our deepest hurts. Over time, the child within us gets attacked, not by strangers, but by these silent forces that live in our thoughts and behaviors. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The truth is, your inner child has been under attack for a long time, and the enemies are clever. They disguise themselves as discipline, as protection, even as motivation. But in reality, they are destroying the very part of you that makes life feel alive. The good news? Once you can spot them, you can defeat them. And when you do, the inner child that has been waiting in silence can finally return to you with all its creativity, freedom, and light. Chapter 1. The Hidden Enemies. In this journey, we'll uncover 5 of these toxic enemies, one by one. We'll explore how they creep into your life, how they keep you stuck, and most importantly, how you can break free. Because healing is not about going back in time. It's about giving your inner child the safety it always needed, right here and now. So let's step into this together. Let's expose the hidden enemies that have been silencing your inner child and learn how to set it free. Enemy 1. The inner critic. The first enemy of your inner child is one you probably already know well. It's the voice in your head that tells you you're not enough. The one that says, you could have done better, or you're not as good as them. Sometimes it sounds harsh and loud. Other times, it hides behind reasonable-sounding thoughts, like, you should try harder, or don't make a fool of yourself. But no matter how it speaks, its message is always the same. You are not worthy as you are. This is the inner critic, and it is relentless. For many of us, the inner critic feels so normal that we don't even question it. We assume it's just our own voice, the rational part of us pushing us to be better. But if you pay close attention, you'll notice that it doesn't actually encourage you. It tears you down. It doesn't leave you feeling inspired. It leaves you feeling smaller, defeated, and ashamed. Carl Jung understood this voice deeply. He once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Think about that for a moment. To accept yourself completely means to stop hiding from your flaws, to stop fighting your imperfections, and to embrace every part of you, good and bad. That is terrifying for many of us because we've spent so long listening to the critic that we've forgotten what it feels like to simply be. The critic often begins in childhood. Maybe you heard harsh words, or maybe you absorbed unspoken expectations from the people around you. Even if no one meant harm, children are incredibly sensitive. They pick up on pressure, on comparison, on silence. And over time, those messages sink in and form a permanent voice inside. By the time you're grown, you no longer need anyone else to criticize you. The critic has become your own. What's tragic about this enemy is that it doesn't just silence you in the present. It also strangles your inner child. That child within you, the one who used to create, play, and imagine freely, is still there. But when the critic speaks, the child feels unsafe. It doesn't want to draw, to sing, to explore, or to play because it knows it will be judged. Slowly, that vibrant inner world goes quiet, and life begins to feel more about performance than about living. Have you ever wanted to try something new, but the first thought in your mind was, what if I look stupid? Or, what if I fail? That's the critic. Or maybe you've achieved something meaningful, but immediately thought, it's not good enough. Or, anyone could have done this. That's also the critic. It never lets you win because its job is not to help you grow. It's to keep you small. So how do you defeat it? The first step is awareness. Start listening for the critic. Notice when that voice enters your mind. Write down the words it uses. You may be surprised at how cruel they sound when they're on paper. Then ask yourself, would I ever speak this way to a child who was learning? Would I ever say these words to someone I cared about? If the answer is no, then why do you say them to yourself? The second step is compassion. When the critic shouts, try replacing its words with gentler ones. Instead of saying, I'm so stupid, say, I made a mistake, and that's okay. I can learn from it. Instead of, I'll never be good enough, say, I'm growing, and growth takes time. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about balancing the harshness of the critic with the kindness your inner child has always needed. And the third step is to reconnect with play. One of the critic's greatest fears is that you'll stop listening, that you'll pick up a brush and paint without caring what it looks like, that you'll write, sing, or dance without worrying about being judged. Every time you allow yourself to play, even in small ways, you weaken the critic's grip. You remind your inner child that it still has a voice, that it can still be seen, and that it is safe to be itself again. The inner critic will not disappear overnight. It has been with you for years, maybe even decades. But every time you recognize it, every time you challenge it, every time you choose kindness over judgment, it loses power. And slowly, the inner child begins to emerge again. Remember Jung's words, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." The critic may have shaped you, but it does not define you. You can choose, starting now, to build a new voice, one that protects your inner child instead of destroying it, one that allows you to live, not in constant fear of judgment, but in the freedom of being yourself. Enemy 2. Shame. The second enemy of your inner child is shame. And unlike guilt, which says, "I did something wrong," shame goes deeper. It whispers, "I am wrong." Shame does not just criticize your actions. It attacks the very core of your identity. And when it takes root, it convinces you that you are somehow flawed, broken, or unworthy of being seen. Carl Jung once described shame as a soul-eating emotion. Think about those words for a moment. Soul-eating. Shame is not a passing feeling. It lingers. It feeds on your energy, on your confidence, on your joy. It quietly gnaws away at the parts of you that want to step into the light. Shame often begins early. Sometimes it's in the little things. The look of disappointment when you didn't meet expectations. The laughter that stung when you made a mistake. Or the silence that felt like rejection when you needed comfort. Other times, it comes from bigger experiences. Moments where you felt exposed, judged, or not enough. As children, we rarely have the tools to process these experiences. Instead, we internalize them. We carry them. And slowly, they form into a belief. There must be something wrong with me. The inner child is especially vulnerable to shame because children naturally want to be loved, accepted, and seen. When that love feels conditional, or when acceptance is withdrawn, the child often doesn't question the situation. Instead, the child questions themselves. If they are upset with me, I must be bad. If they leave me out, I must not be worthy. If I am hurt, maybe it's my fault. Those thoughts don't fade with time. They grow into patterns, and those patterns become shame. Shame is powerful because it thrives in silence. It tells you not to speak, not to show, not to share. It convinces you that if anyone ever truly saw you, they would turn away. So you hide. You build masks. You try to present yourself as capable, strong, or perfect. Anything to avoid being exposed. And while the world sees the mask, the inner child remains jhanas locked away, convinced it will never be enough. Have you ever had a moment where you felt joy, but almost instantly a thought came in to shut it down? Maybe you laughed too loudly and suddenly felt embarrassed. Maybe you shared an idea and then replayed it in your mind, thinking, that was stupid. Or maybe you wanted to express yourself through art, through words, through emotion. But a heavy voice inside said, don't. You'll look foolish. That's shame. It doesn't just stop you from doing things, it stops you from being yourself. But here is the truth about shame. It cannot survive in the light. The moment you bring it out of hiding, it begins to lose power. That is why Jung's work often emphasized awareness and acceptance. He knew that what remains buried in the unconscious continues to control us. But once it is made conscious, it can be healed. So how do we begin to defeat shame? The first step is naming it. When you feel that heavy, silencing voice inside, pause and ask, is this shame speaking? Often, simply recognizing it as shame, not as truth, creates distance. You are not the shame. You are the person experiencing it. The second step is expression. Shame wants you to stay silent. So the most radical thing you can do is speak. Write about your feelings in a journal. Put them into words, even if no one else will ever read them. Create art that expresses what you cannot yet say. Share small pieces of your truth with people you trust. Each time you bring shame into the open, its grip loosens. The third step is self-compassion. When shame tells you that you are unworthy, respond with kindness. Remind yourself that every person carries flaws. Every person makes mistakes. And every person has moments they wish they could erase. You are not alone in this. And you are not broken. The child within you does not need to be perfect to be worthy of love. Jung believed that integration, bringing together the hidden parts of ourselves, was the path to wholeness. Shame tries to fragment you, to make you believe you must cut off parts of yourself to be acceptable. But healing means reclaiming those very parts and welcoming them back. Imagine for a moment speaking to your inner child face to face. Picture the younger version of you who still carries the weight of shame. Would you tell them they are broken? Would you tell them they are unworthy? Or would you hold them, listen to them, and remind them that they never deserved that burden? That is the work of healing. Not shoving shame away, but meeting it with compassion so the child inside can finally feel safe. Remember this. Shame thrives in silence, but it dies in acceptance. The moment you see it for what it is, the moment you bring it into the open and face it with gentleness, it begins to dissolve. And as it dissolves, the inner child begins to lift its head again, ready to step out of hiding. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And yet, that is also the most liberating thing. To accept yourself completely means that shame no longer gets the final word. Your inner child does not need to hide anymore. It can breathe. It can speak. It can play. And when shame no longer rules your life, you discover something extraordinary. You were never broken in the first place. You were simply carrying a story that was never yours to hold. Enemy 3. Repression. The third enemy of your inner child is repression. And repression is tricky because, on the surface, it looks like control. It looks like strength. It looks like you've got everything handled. But underneath, it is one of the most dangerous forces you can carry within. Repression is what happens when you bury your feelings, your memories, or your needs so deep that you convince yourself they don't exist. You push them down because they feel too heavy, too painful, or too unacceptable. You tell yourself, that doesn't matter anymore. That's in the past. I'm fine. But the truth is, those buried feelings don't disappear. They wait. They live in the shadows of your mind, shaping your thoughts, your behaviors, and your choices without you even realizing it. Carl Jung explained it simply. What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. Repression does not erase pain. It multiplies it. And the more you push down, the stronger the pressure becomes. The inner child suffers the most under repression. Imagine a child trying to cry, trying to scream, trying to express itself, but being constantly told, "No. Be quiet. Stop it. That doesn't matter." Over time, that child learns to silence its voice. It stops asking for what it needs. It stops showing how it feels. And eventually, it stops trusting that it will ever be heard. Have you ever found yourself snapping over something small? An inconvenience, a mistake, a passing comment? Yet the intensity of your reaction felt way out of proportion? That's often repression. It's the buildup of unexpressed emotion finally breaking through in unexpected ways. Or maybe you've had moments where you felt numb, like you couldn't access your feelings at all. That too is repression. the cost of holding everything down for too long. And here's the hard truth. Repression doesn't just silence pain. It silences joy, too. When you bury sadness, anger, or fear, you also bury your capacity to feel deeply alive. The inner child doesn't get to pick and choose emotions. If it's forced to hide one, it hides them all. So playfulness, creativity, wonder, they all get locked away alongside the pain. Jung believed that repression was one of the main ways the unconscious shapes our lives. He warned that the parts of ourselves we refuse to face will continue to influence us, often in destructive ways. He once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, repression keeps you trapped. It convinces you that you're in control, but really, you're being controlled by the very things you're trying to avoid. So, how do you begin to free yourself from repression? The key is safe expression. You don't need to rip the lid off all at once. In fact, that can feel overwhelming. Instead, start with small, gentle ways of letting your inner child speak again. One way is through journaling. Write without censoring yourself. Don't worry about grammar or structure. Just let the words come. Sometimes what emerges will surprise you. Feelings you didn't know you still carried. Thoughts you had buried long ago. Each word on the page is a release, a small opening for the child inside to breathe. Another way is through art or creativity. Draw, paint, sing, dance, or make something purely for the sake of expression. The goal is not to create something beautiful. It's to give form to what has been trapped inside. Jung often used what he called active imagination, a practice of allowing images, symbols, and feelings from the unconscious to emerge in creative ways. This is one of the most powerful ways to give your inner child a voice again. And perhaps, most importantly, allow yourself to feel in safe moments. If sadness rises, don't push it down. Let yourself cry. If anger surfaces, find a healthy way to release it. Write it out, move your body, speak it aloud. If joy bubbles up, don't silence it with self-consciousness. Let yourself laugh. Let yourself play. Every time you allow an emotion to exist, you teach your inner child that it is safe to be seen. The journey of overcoming repression is not about digging endlessly into the past. It's about creating space in the present for what you feel. It's about giving yourself permission to experience life fully, without constantly editing or controlling yourself. Jung once wrote, "I'd rather be whole than good." Think about that. Repression often comes from trying to appear good, calm, collected, strong, unshaken. But that's not wholeness. Wholeness means embracing every part of you, even the messy, imperfect, emotional parts. And when you allow yourself to be whole, the inner child finally steps into the light again. So I want you to imagine for a moment, what if the feelings you've been pushing away all these years were not enemies, but signals? What if they were the inner child's way of saying, please, listen to me. Please, don't forget me. Every tear, every spark of anger, every burst of laughter, these are not weaknesses. They are reminders that your inner child is still alive, still waiting to be heard. Repression wants to keep the child locked away. But the moment you open the door, even just a crack, you begin to heal. The silence breaks. The pressure lifts. And the child who thought it had been forgotten begins to feel safe again. Enemy 4. Perfectionism. The fourth enemy of your inner child is perfectionism. On the surface, perfectionism often looks like a strength. People may admire it. They may call you disciplined, hard-working, reliable, and in some ways, it can drive success. But underneath, perfectionism is rarely about true excellence. At its core, it is about fear. The fear that if you are not perfect, you will not be accepted. The fear that mistakes will expose you. The fear that your inner child will finally be seen and judged as not good enough. Carl Jung often spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to face the world. He described it as the role we play, the carefully crafted identity that hides what is vulnerable inside. Perfectionism is one of the most common forms of this mask. It says, if I can present myself as flawless, no one will see what I am hiding. But while the mask may fool others, it traps the child within. The child longs to play, to explore, to make mistakes, to learn. Yet perfectionism suffocates that freedom, turning life into a performance rather than an experience. Think about your own life for a moment. How often have you held back from trying something new because you were afraid you wouldn't do it well enough? How many times have you poured hours into a project, not because you enjoyed it, but because you feared judgment? How often do you review and replay your actions in your mind, criticizing every small detail, convinced you could have done better? That is the voice of perfectionism. And while it might seem like it is pushing you forward, it is actually holding you hostage. The inner child cannot survive in a world ruled by perfectionism. Children learn through trial and error. They grow by experimenting, by falling down, by making mistakes. But when perfectionism takes over, those natural processes of growth and discovery are cut off. The child learns to fear mistakes, to fear failure, to fear anything less than flawless. Slowly, curiosity fades, joy disappears, and life becomes an endless test you can never quite pass. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But perfectionism blocks that privilege because it demands that you become who you think others want you to be. It tells you that your worth is measured in achievements, in approval, in appearances. And so, the authentic self, the true self, gets buried under layers of effort and exhaustion. The tragedy of perfectionism is that it never ends. No matter how much you do, it always demands more. You can reach a milestone, and instead of celebrating, you immediately look ahead to the next one. You can receive praise, but the critic inside whispers that it wasn't really deserved. You can create something beautiful, but instead of joy, you feel relief that it wasn't a failure. Perfectionism steals satisfaction from every accomplishment because it convinces you that you must keep proving your worth. So, how do we begin to defeat this enemy? The first step is awareness. Notice when you are striving for impossible standards. Ask yourself, am I doing this out of joy or out of fear? That simple question can reveal whether you are being guided by your true self or trapped by perfectionism. The second step is permission. Give yourself permission to make mistakes, permission to be messy, permission to be unfinished. This may sound simple, but for someone ruled by perfectionism, it can feel terrifying. Start small. Try something creative where the outcome doesn't matter. Sketch, write, sing, cook, or play. Not for others, not for approval, just for the act itself. Each time you do, you remind your inner child that it is safe to explore again. The third step is to shift your definition of success. Instead of measuring worth by flawless results, measure it by authenticity. Did you show up as yourself? Did you try something new? Did you express what was real for you? If the answer is yes, then that is success. Perfectionism cannot survive when you stop feeding it with impossible goals. And the fourth step is compassion. When you catch yourself falling into perfectionism, don't criticize yourself for it. That only creates another layer of judgment. Instead, speak to yourself with the kindness your inner child needs to hear. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be human. You are worthy even when you make mistakes. Imagine what life would feel like if you no longer had to be perfect. Imagine waking up and feeling free to try, free to play, free to fail, free to simply be. That freedom is what the inner child longs for. That freedom is the antidote to perfectionism. Jung's words remind us again, "I'd rather be whole than good." Perfectionism wants you to be good, flawless, polished, acceptable. But wholeness is about embracing all of you, even the parts that stumble, even the parts that struggle. And when you choose wholeness over perfection, you give your inner child exactly what it needs: the safety to live openly, the freedom to explore, and the joy of being accepted as you are. Perfectionism tells you that you must earn worth through flawless performance. But the truth is, you were already worthy before you ever did a thing. And the moment you realize that, the grip of perfectionism begins to crumble. Enemy 5. Fear of vulnerability. The fifth enemy of your inner child is fear of vulnerability. And of all the enemies we've spoken about, this one is perhaps the most protective and the most deceptive. It doesn't scream at you like the inner critic. It doesn't weigh you down with shame. It doesn't hide feelings as repression does, or demand flawless achievement like perfectionism. Instead, fear of vulnerability whispers softly, "Stay safe. Don't open up. Don't let anyone see too much." On the surface, this fear feels like self-protection. It convinces you that if you stay guarded, you will not be hurt. If you don't show too much of yourself, no one can reject you. If you keep your true feelings hidden, you won't risk embarrassment, disappointment, or pain. And so, you build walls. You put on masks. You carefully control what others see. And you keep the rest tucked away where it feels safe. But here is the paradox. The same walls that keep out pain also keep out connection, joy, and freedom. The same mask that hides your wounds also hides your light. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the doorway to authenticity. And when fear of vulnerability rules your life, your inner child is forced into exile, silent, unseen, and afraid. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Becoming who you truly are requires vulnerability. It means allowing yourself to be seen as imperfect. It means admitting when you are hurting. It means showing your real thoughts, feelings, and dreams without guarantees that they will be understood or accepted. That is terrifying. But it is also where real life begins. Think back to when you were a child. Vulnerability was natural. You cried when you were sad. You laughed when you were happy. You asked for what you wanted. You expressed what you felt without hesitation. But over time, many of us learned that being open came with risks. Maybe you were told to toughen up. Maybe your emotions were dismissed. Maybe your openness was met with rejection or ridicule. And slowly, you learned to hide. You learned that if you kept the tender parts of yourself locked away, it hurt less. The problem is, when you hide for too long, you begin to lose touch with who you really are. You may appear strong, independent, untouchable, but underneath, the inner child is still longing to be held, still longing to be seen. And no matter how high the walls are, that longing never disappears. Have you ever had moments where you wanted to speak up, but stayed silent? Where you wanted to share a feeling, but told yourself, "Don't bother"? Where you wanted to let someone see the real you, but instead put on the mask of "I'm fine"? Those moments are fear of vulnerability at work. Each time it wins, the inner child retreats further into the shadows. The cost of this enemy is heavy. Without vulnerability, there is no true connection. Without vulnerability, there is no creativity, because creativity itself requires risk. The risk of failure, the risk of not being understood. Without vulnerability, there is no healing, because healing requires admitting that you are wounded. So how do we begin to defeat fear of vulnerability? The answer is not to tear down every wall at once. That would be overwhelming. The answer is to take small, intentional steps toward openness. The first step is honesty with yourself. Begin by noticing where you hide. Notice the feelings you push down, the thoughts you censor, the truths you avoid. Write them down. Speak them aloud to yourself. Even if no one else hears them, you are already breaking the silence. The second step is safe expression. Choose one small thing to share, not with the whole world, but in a safe space, with a trusted friend, through writing, through art. Vulnerability doesn't always mean confession. Sometimes it means allowing your inner child to express itself in gentle, creative ways without judgment. The third step is courage. Vulnerability will always feel risky. There is no guarantee that others will respond the way you hope. But the measure of vulnerability is not the reaction you receive. It is the choice to be real. Every time you choose to be authentic instead of guarded, you are telling your inner child, it is safe to step out. You are allowed to exist. Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we hide, the shadow, hold the key to wholeness. Fear of vulnerability keeps the shadow locked away. But when you begin to face that fear, when you allow yourself to be seen even a little, you begin to integrate the parts of yourself that were once hidden. And with that integration comes freedom. I want you to imagine something. Imagine standing face to face with your younger self. That child looks at you with wide eyes, holding the weight of years of hiding. What would you say to them? Would you tell them to stay quiet, to stay small? Or would you tell them, it's okay to be seen. It's okay to be real. You don't have to hide anymore. That is what vulnerability gives to your inner child, the permission to finally come forward and be embraced. Remember this: vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of courage, creativity, and connection. The fear of vulnerability tells you that hiding will keep you safe, but safety without freedom is not living. The moment you choose to be open, even in small ways, is the moment the walls begin to crumble. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." Fear of vulnerability keeps your gaze fixed outward, worrying about how others see you. But when you turn inward and embrace the parts of yourself you once hid, you awaken. You reclaim the fullness of who you are, and your inner child, no longer trapped in silence, can finally step into the light. Chapter 2. The 5 defenses for protecting your inner child. By now, we've uncovered the 5 toxic enemies that attack the inner child: the critic, shame, repression, perfectionism, and fear of vulnerability. Seeing them clearly is powerful, because you can no longer be fooled into thinking they are your only reality. But awareness alone is not enough. If we want to protect the child within us, we must learn to defend it. We must create a space inside ourselves where it can finally feel safe, valued, and free to exist. Carl Jung once wrote, "In every adult there lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, is never completed, and calls for unceasing care." To defend your inner child is to give that eternal child the care it was denied, the care it always needed. This isn't about fighting battles with force. It's about creating an environment of safety, compassion, and acceptance that keeps the enemies from gaining control. The first line of defense is inner safety. Think of the times when you felt attacked by your own thoughts, when the inner critic shouted, when shame pulled you down, when perfectionism left you exhausted. In those moments, your nervous system tightens, your breath shortens, and the inner child feels under threat. Defending it begins with grounding. It can be as simple as pausing to notice your breath, placing your hand on your heart, or gently telling yourself, "I am safe right now." These small actions signal to your inner child that the danger is not real, that it is allowed to relax, that it is not about to be punished or abandoned. The second defense is reparenting yourself. Imagine what a nurturing caregiver would do for a child who is scared, ashamed, or overwhelmed. They wouldn't yell, dismiss, or demand perfection. They would comfort. They would encourage. They would hold the child close and say, "You are okay. You are loved as you are." That is the role you must learn to play for yourself. Each time the critic rises, answer it with kindness. Each time shame appears, respond with compassion. Each time fear silences you, whisper back, "I hear you. You are safe with me." Over time, these small acts of reparenting reshape the inner landscape. The enemies lose their power because they are no longer met with silence. They are met with care. The third defense is play and joy. This may sound simple, even trivial, but it is a profound act of protection. The inner child thrives in play. It thrives in creativity, laughter, curiosity, and freedom. Every time you allow yourself to paint without worrying about the result, to sing without judgment, to explore without a plan, you are defending your inner child from the rigid rules of repression and perfectionism. Joy itself becomes armor. It reminds the child within that life is not just about survival, but about living fully. The fourth defense is awareness and choice. The enemies of the inner child operate most strongly when they go unnoticed. They slip into your thoughts and actions so naturally that you accept them as truth. But the moment you notice them, you create a gap. In that gap lies freedom. When the critic says, "You're not good enough," you can pause and ask, "Is this the critic speaking? Or is this me?" When perfectionism demands more, you can choose to say, "I will rest instead." Defending your inner child doesn't always mean silencing the enemies. Sometimes it simply means refusing to obey them. And finally, the most powerful defense is self-acceptance. Jung reminded us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Why terrifying? Because it means letting go of the masks, the performances, the endless striving for approval. It means embracing not only the light in you, but also the shadows, the mistakes, the scars. Yet this acceptance is exactly what the inner child has been waiting for. When you finally say, "I accept you exactly as you are," the enemies lose their hold. They thrive on your resistance to yourself. They cannot survive in the presence of unconditional acceptance. Defending your inner child is not about becoming perfect at healing. It is about building a safe inner home where the child can finally breathe. A place where mistakes are not punishments, where vulnerability is not dangerous, where joy is not suspicious, and where silence is no longer demanded. Think of it this way. Your inner child has been standing in the cold for years, waiting at the door. Defending it means opening that door, inviting it in, and saying, "You don't have to stand out there anymore. You belong here, with me, safe and warm." When you begin to live this way, the enemies will still appear from time to time. The critic will whisper. Shame will try to pull you back. Perfectionism will push. Fear will knock on the door. But now you are not helpless. You know their names. You see their patterns. And you have the strength to defend the child they once controlled. That is the beginning of true healing. Not the absence of enemies, but the presence of protection. Not the erasing of the past, but the choosing of a new way forward. The inner child has been waiting for this defense. And now, step by step, you are learning to provide it. Chapter 3. The 6 Challenges on the Healing Path. Defending your inner child is powerful, but it does not mean the journey will be smooth. Healing is not a straight line. It is more like a winding path with steep hills, sudden turns, and places where you may stumble. Many people expect that once they uncover the enemies and learn to protect themselves, the pain will disappear. But the truth is, challenges will come. And they are not signs of failure. They are part of the process. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That means we cannot awaken. We cannot heal. Without first facing the parts of ourselves we have avoided. Each step forward brings not only growth, but also discomfort. And if we can accept that, we will be less likely to give up when the path feels hard. The first challenge is resistance to change. Even when the old patterns hurt, they are familiar. The inner critic, shame, repression, perfectionism, fear of vulnerability, they may feel like enemies, but they also feel like home. They have been with you for years. Letting them go can feel like losing a part of yourself. This resistance often shows up as procrastination, distraction, or even self-sabotage. You may catch yourself thinking, maybe I don't really need to do this work. That is not laziness. That is resistance. And resistance is simply fear in disguise, the fear of stepping into the unknown. The second challenge is the return of old voices. Even after you've made progress, the critic will come back. Shame will whisper again. Perfectionism will tighten its grip. It may feel like you are moving backward, but this is not regression. It is a cycle. Healing does not erase the old voices. It teaches you how to respond differently when they return. Each time you face them, you grow stronger. Each time you choose compassion over criticism, you break another chain. The third challenge is the fear of letting go. Many people don't realize how much identity is tied to their wounds. If you have lived most of your life with shame or perfectionism, it may feel strange to exist without them. Who are you if you are not striving endlessly? Who are you if you are not defined by your failures? This fear can create an invisible barrier. Part of you may cling to the pain because at least it is familiar. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." Letting go means facing yourself fully, and that can feel like stepping off a cliff without knowing if the ground is below. The fourth challenge is the slow nature of healing. In a world that rewards speed and quick results, inner work feels frustrating. You may want to heal your inner child in weeks. You may want immediate freedom from the enemies. But healing does not work that way. The inner child has been hiding for years, sometimes decades. It will not come out all at once. It will peak, retreat, and then try again. This requires patience. Some days will feel like breakthroughs. Others will feel like setbacks. The real progress is often invisible until you look back months later and realize how much lighter you have become. The fifth challenge is loneliness on the path. Inner child work is deeply personal. While others may support you, no one can walk the path for you. There may be moments when you feel misunderstood, when others cannot see the battles you are fighting within. This loneliness can be heavy. But remember, your inner child is with you. You are not truly alone. Each step you take together strengthens the bond between you and that hidden part of yourself. And finally, the sixth challenge is self-doubt. You may wonder if you are doing it right. You may question whether healing is even possible. You may feel tempted to give up. This doubt can feel overwhelming, but it is also a sign of growth. Because doubt only appears when you are stepping into new territory. It is a natural reaction to change. The key is not to let doubt stop you. Instead, treat it as a sign that you are moving in the right direction. So how do we face these challenges? Not by pushing them away, but by expecting them. by saying, "Yes, this will be hard. Yes, the old voices will return. Yes, I will stumble. But none of that means I am failing. It means I am healing." Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." The challenges on the path are part of what happened. They are part of the story. But you always have a choice in how you meet them. You can choose compassion instead of criticism, patience instead of frustration, courage instead of fear. That choice, repeated again and again, is what slowly transforms the path from a place of struggle into a place of freedom. These enemies are not outside you. They live within. The inner critic, shame, repression, perfectionism, and fear of vulnerability all work to silence the child inside. But once you can see them, you can transform them. Healing is not about erasing the past. It is about reparenting the child within you, giving it the safety and love it needed all along. Jung reminded us, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." The invitation is to look inward, to listen, to care for that hidden child, to give it the freedom to live again. Your inner child is not weak. It is waiting for you to set it free. I hope this video was helpful. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. Thanks for watching.